Hsieh, who is a research associate in New Testament text and language at Tyndale House. And he will present a paper on paragraph and chapter divisions in early Greek and Latin manuscripts of Ephesians.
That was a perfect pronunciation of my surname. Hsieh. Right? So when we studied Bible structure, we already have two tools already in our printed Bibles. But we've got the chapter and verse divisions. The chapter divisions come down from Stephen Langdon. Among this group, I don't really have to say too much about some of the problems with the chapter divisions. Some of them are too long and short. Some of them are poorly placed, like Ephesians 6, probably not a good place to break up the household code. So they're helpful, but there's also some problems with the chapter and verse divisions. So in light of that, Grant Osborne says we should not depend on chapter verse divisions. And he says that the paragraph is the key to the thought development of biblical books. So he lays out sort of this method of creating a book chart where you go one paragraph at a time and summarize each paragraph in a few words, and then trying to divide it up into major and more minor units by adding these lines or double lines. Now, he also acknowledges that obviously there are some problems with using paragraphing in the Bible. Obviously, all the Bibles differ, so he acknowledges that. This is just a preliminary way of getting into the structure of the Bible is to try and summarize the paragraphing in whatever Bible you have or are using. But yeah, obviously there's a lot of differences even just among critical editions of the Greek New Testament. So if we look at Ephesians in NA28 and UBS 5, the UBS 5 has the same text, of course, as NA28, but the paragraphing is quite different. It's got one more, but then that's based on adding 4 and removing 3. The Tyndale edition has 31, and NIV, I just threw that in as an example, has 36 divisions. In NA28, taking from 27, 26, 25, they also have these mid-paragraph breaks, I guess I'll call it, where you've got a little bit of space, and then you have a capital letter. They also have these major breaks where an entire line is left blank, like here in Ephesians 1:15. There are 4 of those in Ephesians. I want to ask Holger, maybe he'll make a comment, because the NA28 took these out, the mid-paragraph breaks and the major breaks from the Catholic epistles, where they, ECM changed that. So I do wonder if NA29 will also take those out or not. I think they are a helpful legacy from the Kurt Aland era, that they went to this length of dividing up the text. So I'm of the opinion it would be nice to maybe have them back, but that's obviously up to the others. So there's so many options, and we can do our best to try and navigate through these different options and make our own decisions based on grammar and syntax. And it's been in vogue to use things like discourse analysis now to study structure. But besides these modern translations, modern editions, all right, downloading. Oh no, it's wanting to update Flash Player. Okay. I don't have any Flash in there. I think I got it. Yeah, there we go. Okay. So beyond the modern translations and just comparing them, beyond grammar and syntax, discourse analysis, we have sort of other tools that we can rediscover, right? We're not really discovering, we're just rediscovering things that have been preserved for us in the manuscript tradition. And today I will talk about paragraphing, and then I'll talk about chapter divisions in Greek and Latin. And then I'll finish off with, okay, so we have this data, what can we actually do with it in terms of exegesis, in terms of a modern critical edition using that information to determine its own paragraph and its own edition. So starting off with paragraphing in Greek manuscripts, I don't think I have to say much to this group in terms of what we find in the manuscript. We find a thesis, like here in our Librinus. The first letter may or may not be enlarged, but it is put into the left margin. We find the paragraphos obviously not to be confused with the English word paragraph. It's the paragraphos, paragraphoi, in Codex Vaticanus and Vaticanus, and both of these manuscripts also use ecthesis as well as paragraphoi. So does Alexandrinus, but less frequently uses paragraphos. So we find these two main ways of indicating, say this carefully, something like a paragraph, right? We don't want to jump in and say that these are equivalent to our modern notion of paragraph, but something like a paragraph with ecthesis and the paragraphos. You start a new project and you think, oh, this probably shouldn't be too difficult. They're pretty easy, right? They're right there. You just record the data, pretty obvious here where they are. And then, of course, as you get deeper into a project, you realize, no, actually, there's a lot of issues where I have to think about, well, how am I going to represent this? How do I interpret this way or that way? There's a lot of stuff that comes up. So basically, I want to talk about six different issues that come up when you're gathering data on paragraph. And then, of course, once you gather it, you have to present it so that other people can use it, whether the editorial committee or a wider group. And there are issues with gathering it, and there are issues with presenting it in an apparatus. So those are two separate issues. Those obviously very closely tied when you gather it. You're sort of presenting it to yourself at least, for them to clean it up. So the first one, I think Chuck Bill's on the video call. He's written a very helpful monograph. So the first issue that comes up is this line, right? This paragraph line. Some other scribe could have just added it later. Could be much later. In which case, if it was added later, then it's still in the manuscript, but it wouldn't be from the 4th century. It would be from whatever you thought it was added. I think Charles provides a very helpful defense that those are original to the 4th century manuscript, and that's important to resolve in your mind, right? To know what are you getting when you take this data from Vaticanus. Are you getting something from the 4th century or not? Second issue, so I mean that same issue comes up in Codex Sinaiticus, but it's most important in Vaticanus because the scribia Vaticanus New Testament primarily just uses the paragraph. The second issue is when you get to papyri. In P66, right? You have the ecthesis right there with Hsieh. Before you have a line break a little bit early, so the line's not completely filled up. The question is, okay, what if the manuscript is damaged, like here, where you don't know if there's an ecthesis here, but you do see a line break a little bit early, so you've got space. So what do you do in that situation? Do you conjecture that based on scribal habit, which is, I think on scribal habit, P74 probably would have had an ecthesis there, but we can't know for certain, right? Because it's not there. You just see the space. So in an apparatus, what I would notate is just that there's a line break. I put in parentheses 5, meaning the line break has blank space of about 5 letters width. And then I would put lacuna on the left margin so that the user can know what is happening there. I think probably there would be an ecthesis there based on scribal habits, but we can't be certain. Third issue is with blank space. So we have the thesis, we have paragraph 1. Of course, the text is written scriptio continuo, so when there is blank space, something is going on. We don't know exactly, obviously, what's going on, but something is going on. Usually, Codex Vaticanus will have a space, so then you would probably expect the paragraphos there. And so did the scribes forget it? Just accidentally omitted it, and it probably would have been there. Is this some sort of hierarchy, or this is weaker than a paragraphos, or something like that? What's happening in this situation? This is obviously pretty ambiguous. We don't know. I think probably we forgot it here, but my point here is that you should be up to the data gatherer to just write. You see there's a space of about two letters width, and just leave it at that, right? We're not going to say this is a major or minor division. I don't know. You got to study the scribal habits out of all these before you can make that kind of determination. So just record what you see rather than interpret it. This is more of the data gathering phase. There are some ectheses in Codex Sinaiticus that are hard to see. In this case, on the third line, I've seen enough of these in Sinaiticus to where even though it's like, just slightly into the left margin of the kappa, I mean, you compare it with the kappa 2 lines up, so that's super helpful. This is probably an ecthesis, but it would be super easy for a data gatherer to miss these. Thankfully, we have the Codex Sinaiticus website. Thankful to the people who put that together. So you can always compare against that. But these are very easy to miss. And if you wanted to say maybe it wasn't, then that's fine too. So I would mark this as an ecthesis, but mark it with dater that it apparently is an ecthesis. The fifth issue, this starts to get into the presentation of the data. Martin Carr is here, and we had a very nice discussion back in August at the British New Testament Study conference, and I really enjoy the work that he's done in the Hsieh of Revelation. I read most of volume 3.2 and found a lot of things very helpful. But one area where Martin had mentioned to me that he would hope that we would sort of adopt the same abbreviations so that we have a unified system of recording punctuation and paragraphing data. But I have to respectfully disagree with what Hsieh of Revelation has done in this instance of where Hsieh of Revelation basically has a symbol for a major break, a pilcrow, and then it has a symbol like a square colored in for a standard break. And this is similar to what this dissertation by Jiang Han and this article by Sean Adams does, where basically they record their interpretation of what they see, right? Instead of saying there's ecthesis, they say there's major division. Instead of saying there's a space or there's a middle dot, they say there's a minor division. And that's recording your interpretation of the data rather than just recording what the manuscript has, right? Ecthesis, paragraph, space. And I think that's a wrong move when creating an apparatus to present the data to people. That it's not helpful because, well, okay, what is the major division there? What is the minor division that you want to know? Because maybe you'd come to a different conclusion based on studying the scribal habits in each manuscript. But at the same time, we do have to think about a hierarchy of divisions. That maybe ecthesis is stronger than the space in some manuscripts. Maybe those that use both ecthesis and paragraphos, maybe they're not using it basically interchangeably. But of course, this takes looking at data over a long portion of a manuscript and studying the scribal habits. And my point here really is just to say that it's not that we can't or shouldn't interpret these divisions as major or minor. It's that interpretation should not go into the apparatus, right? It should not go into the apparatus. You just record what's there, space, paragraph, ecthesis. That way the user can know what's there, and then the user can decide, and the editors can decide on what they think is major or minor, or whatever categories that you want to have. So it's not, I'm not saying we're not going to interpret it. It's more at the presentation or apparatus stage. I think it is a better practice to just record what's there rather than to say it's a major or minor break in the apparatus. Leave interpretation to a stage, of a commentary or something like that, which there is commentary in some Revelation on punctuation. So this is experimental, and there's probably mistakes in here. Yeah, there's a mistake right there. Okay, that's not supposed to be green. But you can scan the QR code to get to the handout that I have and appendices 1 and 2 covering Ephesians. And I just want to talk through why I think this is a helpful way. And you can obviously say no, it's not helpful. A way of presenting the data. So first of all, right, it's a chart, and it's not an apparatus. A big chunk of text. It's a chart that you can read horizontally, right? So you want to know Ephesians 1:1. You read it horizontally and you see what's happening in each manuscript. And that's what a traditional apparatus does, right? You look at one location and you read it horizontally and you get all the information at that one location. But you can also read it vertically, right? So let's say you just want to know, okay, how is O2 or O1 working in. Now, of course, you can do this with the traditional apparatus, but it takes a lot of work to pick out O1 in every instance, right? It would take a lot of work. Whereas if you have a chart like this, you can quickly read vertically. You can see sort of how often, you know, O2 or O1 has an ecthesis, and then you can also see pretty easily where there, you know, again, 111, where O1 is alone in having a major, well, yeah. Okay, so you have the vertical, you have the horizontal, and then the color. Okay, you can't do color in a printed edition. Figure out something else with shading or something like this, or maybe this should just be a digital thing. But for now, we have color. So the color is the interpretive layer. Okay, the color is the interpretive layer. You can ignore it and just look at what's there, base, ecthesis. But the color is based on studying scribal habits. Ecthesis is pretty much the primary paragraph-like way of textual division in O1, O2, O6. Based on studying scribal habits, the paragraphos is the main way in O3 in Vaticanus. You know, so that's why paragraphos is in green, not ecthesis. So that's the interpretive layer, and then of course there's yellow. Yellow is basically it's ambiguous. So at Ephesians 1:3, Vaticanus doesn't have a paragraphos; it just has a space. You can disagree, but I think it's about a letter and a half of space. So it's yellow. Maybe you think that's a minor. Maybe you think that's a major, and you made a mistake and should have put a paragraphos there. That's, well, I'm fine, I think. But the whole point is, okay, you can read vertically, you can read horizontally, you can ignore the interpretive layer with the colors, or you can take the interpretive layer that I've added on top of there. But the apparatus tries to present the data objectively to the user so they can make their own judgments, but still adds an interpretive layer on top to give my or the editor's judgment on what's happening there. So that's paragraph divisions, and hopefully you took that down because you'll need that QR code and handout for the next part. Okay, I gotta go through this back. So chapter divisions, actually there's not as much to say about this, but chapter divisions, we have Codex Vaticanus, 4th century, 6 divisions. We only have this one manuscript, so there's, you don't have to create a critical edition of this. There's only one manuscript. There's another manuscript that has Luke, but for Ephesians, this is it. We've got 6 divisions. We've got the alien system, which I don't have to say anything because the manual already introduced this whole system. We have 10 divisions in the alien system. There's no critical edition, so basically, I went through all the variations, and I think that's appendix 3. I went through the variations, trying to figure it out. I ended up basically, after a lot of work, saying that the NA28 and von Soden, what they have in NA28 is probably correct. So, a lot of work to say that what we already have is correct. That's basically what the textual criticism is. We have the Latin chapter divisions that Dalton de Bruin reversed for us. I think only these 2 are worth really including in an apparatus because of their date, 4th to 5th century, and because there are a lot of manuscript witnesses. A lot of the other groups or types, you just have 1 or 2 witnesses, so it doesn't seem like that type ended up being that popular or influential. So finally, how do we use the data? What can we do with the data once we've gathered it into there? I always find Peter Head to be fun to follow in various ways. So, Martin had said that ECM Revelation is going to punctuate Hebrews Revelation according to how the manuscripts of the first millennium were. Then Peter steps in and says, we're fortunate that they all have the same punctuation, which obviously they don't. But I really like Juan Hernandez's response, where he says, what is meant is not that the punctuation will be followed, but that it will be consulted. Okay, so there's the idea. Now, the Tyndale House first edition did basically just follow 5 manuscripts based on the majority vote. So they did kind of do that but the reason they did that is because they needed a research project, which is what we did. And so now you can basically balance internal, just look at the text itself against the manuscript tradition. There's some cases where the manuscript tradition is basically unanimous, including the chapter systems, and that would give us a strong push towards that. And then in other cases, the text itself, the structure, you do discourse analysis, you study the conjunctions, you know, all the traditional tools. And you might say, okay, no, I disagree with this. But the whole point is that we give the manuscripts a voice in the discussion. We give them a seat at the table. We consult them. They don't automatically win, but they get consulted, and we pair that with internal evidence of the text, and we make our decisions. All right, thank you.
So we have some time for questions.
Just a fact on your table where you were presenting the data, what was the rationale for the ordering of the manuscripts?
Yes.
You started with Vaticanus, but Sinaiticus, yeah.
Yeah, so if you have the handout and you go all the way to the end of Appendix 1, what you'll notice is that I total up how many green and how many yellow there are. And basically the left side is the least number of total. And then, okay, 04 has lacuna, so it's hard, you know, you can't, that's not fair. And then 01 has the most. So it's ordered from least divisions to most in that one book. So obviously that could change from book to book, but to give you a sense of who's using it a lot and who's not using it so much. That's the ordering, yeah.
I just wonder if it's helpful if it changes from book to book. I mean, just to think about that, or is it this consistency then? Or,
it's just, yeah, something I discussed with Dirk, and
oh, it must be right.
I think, I mean, if it's explained to the user, and maybe you can explain it on each page or something, I think it is helpful just to get a sense of who has the least and who has the most. Because I did initially just order it 01, 02, 03, you know. But what does that tell you? That really tells you nothing. I mean, that's just the designations in the regular line system. I did organize it at one point by 4th century, 5th century, 6th century, so that's another option. But then here it's by the number of divisions. So there, I mean, there's multiple ways you could do it.
The next question at the bottom.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Your system is very convincing. We started when with text system, when preparing the edition of Revelation. We had a problem for the presentation in the ECM. If we follow your way, the segmentation apparatus will be a huge apparatus. And in the end, we decided together with Münster, we need an easier system for the reader. It's a compromise. But also, we are now preparing Hebrew, and we want to do it better. If there would be a consensus that we should give all the special markers, we will do it, yeah. Since we must look for the special marker. But the system will be so complex, yeah, that I'm not sure that it is helpful. So it was convincing for me and Münster, the colleagues of Münster, that let's do a segmentation apparatus, but do it shortly. Yeah? The readers must need a short apparatus. We had in Revelation about 20 manuscripts up to the year 1000, and there were lacunae, and therefore in the end we have always 10 or 12 or 13, yeah. And you see, you now have 6 manuscripts. Yeah. And so it will be an old volume as long as a study volume. Yeah. It makes sense. Yeah. Can you do it exemplarily for a whole book, for example? That would be a great help.
Yeah, I mean, this on Appendix 3 of the handout, I give sort of what it might look like in the Tyndale House edition. You can scan a QR code if you haven't had it. But yeah, I agree. This needs to be published as a separate volume. If you I think, is this already font size 10? If you decrease the font size, you could probably fit. If you get rid of the Tyndale, and Dirk hates it where I put in the modern editions. But if you get rid of Tyndale, you know, that's 2 more rows for more manuscripts. But it's really just 600 and earlier, and then 1424 is a good manuscript, so we put that in. Yeah, there's a lot of options, but I think a separate volume is probably the main way to go. But yeah, Appendix 3, I give an example of what it might look like in the Tyndale edition. Put it in on it, so if you guys are able to do that. That's what I think is possible.
Sorry, we must go on now. So thank you so much.